Hey everybody, welcome to Color in the Landscape Part 2 of 2. Bed layout and preparation. Site selection. So when you're selecting a location for a planting bed in your landscape, always remember that you want to select a well-drained site. Avoid low-lying areas where water collects. And always consider making a raised bed. So even raising a bed just a few inches above grade will position the root systems of the plants that you put into the planting bed higher than the grade and put them in a better drained situation. Now you don't have to use a raised bed every time you make a planting bed, but they just seem to work. They have a lot of benefits. So here is the site. And you can probably tell right off the bat that this particular site is not a site in Texas just by looking at the turf grass that's growing in the yard. So these are cool season turf grasses that you see here, primarily Kentucky bluegrass and perennial ryegrass. So one of the first things that you would do after you have selected your site is to kind of lay out the border or edge of that site. And a nice way to do that is by using an old piece of garden hose. So you can take the hose and you can kind of lay it more or less in such a way as to outline the border of the bed that you want to create. Okay, once you have a general idea of where that bed's going to go, there's a question that you have to answer, and that is, do you want to remove existing vegetation? And if you want to do that, how are you going to do that? So in the case of the picture that we just saw a second ago, the existing vegetation is that turf grass. So we have a couple choices. We could outline the bed and then spray the turf grass with a non-selective systemic herbicide like glyphosate or Roundup. And the best time to spray Roundup is always when the vegetation is actively growing. Roundup is not effective when sprayed on vegetation that is dormant and not actively growing. A second way that we could remove existing vegetation is by cutting out the sod. Now that's going to be a lot more work, and for a large bed that's probably going to mean you're going to have to rent a sod cutter to cut the sod and roll it up, remove it, get it off site. But the one advantage to using a sod cutter and doing sod removal is you're going to get a real nice bed edge created when you do that. When you spray with a herbicide and just kill the existing vegetation, you really don't get a nice edge created. I mean, you can come back and make one later, but removing the sod kind of gives you that right off the bat. Alright, so this is a can of marking paint that we would use to delineate the outline of the bed. Okay, and in this picture you can see that the bed outline has been established on the ground and that it has been marked with a can of orange marking paint. Alright, for this particular bed, the homeowner chose to remove the existing sod. So you can see that the sod has been cut away, and that sod needs to be disposed of or used somewhere else in the lawn or yard. Maybe if you have an area where your grass isn't growing very well, where it's thin, you can cut that area out and use the sod that you removed in the creation of your bed to kind of replace the poor sod. So in this picture you can see we're making a raised bed. Now I just want to tell you that you don't have to make a raised bed quite as big as this raised bed. In this particular case, the homeowner chose to create quite a high raised bed. But like I said earlier, even making a raised bed that's 1 or 2 inches above grade can help immensely with the establishment of new plant material. All right, so if you're making a raised bed, you're going to need additional topsoil. Again, here's another clue that we're not in Texas. Look at the color of the topsoil. Kind of a nice, rich, black, dark brown color. So the topsoil was delivered and dumped in the street, and then the landscaping company is in the process of picking that up with a loader and moving it into the client's backyard. All right, one thing you want to think about, if it's a bigger job and if you're going to be moving topsoil from the street into the backyard, you do want to protect the existing sod, existing grass. And one great way to protect the existing sod is to lay down 2 by 8 foot long pieces of 3/4 inch plywood. And basically you make a road or a track that you can run your piece of equipment over. This distributes the weight of the equipment. Now remember, a tractor is heavy enough as it is, but when it's carrying a load of heavy topsoil, it's even heavier. And if you did this without these pieces of 2x4, you would definitely be causing compaction in the lawn. So every effort must be made to protect the existing lawn from damage caused by equipment. In this picture, you can see that progress on the bed is continuing. When making planting beds, always consider using amendments. One type of amendment that people often use is some source of organic matter. So this could be compost. This could be organic matter that was purchased at a garden center. So there's all different sources of organic matter that you could use. Organic matter is going to improve the water holding capacity of the raised bed and also improve cation exchange capacity. A second amendment that you might consider would be expanded shale. Expanded shale is an aggregate. It's going to provide aeration and drainage. A third type of amendment that you might want to consider would be some type of fertilizer. You don't necessarily have to use a complete fertilizer. Phosphorus is a key element in plant establishment because of its roles in root development and flowering. So some people just incorporate a phosphorus containing fertilizer rather than a complete fertilizer. So whatever amendments that you choose to use, make sure to till them into the existing topsoil. In this picture, you see that the raised bed is completed and has been graded and shaped. And in this picture, you can see that the plants have been purchased and laid out on the raised bed in the position where they are going to be planted. Edging the bed, so for a more finished look, use some type of bed edging. That could be pavers or bricks or something like that to create a finished edge on the bed. Using a plant spacing guide. So what you see pictured on the left is an example of a plant spacing guide. So if we look at this spacing guide, and if we look at the top row, if we wanted to space our plants 4 inches apart, you can see from the spacing guide that a 4-inch spacing means that we're going to be able to fit 9 plants per square foot of bed area. A 6-inch spacing means that we're going to be able to fit 4 plants per square foot of bed area. So the difference being when you space the plants further apart, then you're going to get less plants per square foot. So the first thing you have to do is determine the area of your planting bed, And earlier in the semester we went through lots of the math that you can use to determine areas. For example, we know how to calculate the area of a circle, we know how to calculate the area of a square or the area of a rectangular shaped bed. So we need to go back and use the math we learned earlier to calculate bed area. After you've done that, you need to select your desired spacing. 4, 5, 6 inches or so on. Alright, so you know the area of your bed, so you're going to multiply the area of your bed times the multiplier for the spacing you selected. For example, let's say that you have a bed and it's a rectangular shaped bed measuring 10 feet by 30 feet. So the area of that bed is going to be 10 feet times 30 feet, which is going to be 300 square feet of bed area. You want to plant marigolds in the bed at an 8-inch spacing. If you look at the spacing chart and find the row for 8-inch spacing, you can see that at 8 inches we can fit 2.25 plants per square foot. We already know that we have 300 square feet times 2.25 plants per square feet gives us a total of 675 plants that we would need to fill in a 300 square foot bed at an 8-inch spacing. Here are some practice problems for you. So in problem number 1, we have a rectangular shaped bed. It measures 16 feet by 20 feet. And you want to plant Texas sage at a 10-inch spacing. So how many plants are you going to need to fill up a 16-foot by 20-foot bed if you're planting the plants at a 10-inch spacing? So now would be a good time to pause the video, do the math, and then come back and start the video again to see whether you have the correct answer. The correct answer is 464 plants. Problem number 2. You have a circular bed with a diameter of 20 feet. You want to plant marigolds in the bed at a spacing of 8 inches. How many plants would you need to fill up that circular bed with marigolds spaced 8 inches apart? So pause the video, do the math, check back and see whether you got the right answer. The correct answer is 707 plants. Good for you if you got that. Question number 3. So here is the bed, and if you look at the bed you can see it's made up of different geometric shapes. We have a rectangle in the middle of the bed, and then on the ends of the bed we have 2 half circles. So we want to plant perennial sage at a 15-inch spacing in the rectangular part of the bed. And we want to plant calibrachoa at an 8-inch spacing in the half circles that you find at the ends of the bed. So pause the video, work this out, come back and see whether you got the right answer. Okay, how many of each kind of plant do we need to plant this bed? We would need about 102 perennial sage and approximately 113 calibrachoa plants. That ends Color in the Landscape, Part 2 of 2. Thanks again for watching.